So today's speaker is Will Wade. He's going to be talking about something I think we've probably all experienced. So I'm personally very excited to hear all about it. So Will, go ahead and take it away.
So I'm Will Wade. I work at Supply Hog, one of the startups in town. And today, burnout. It's an interesting topic. But first, a few disclaimers. I am not a psychologist. I am married to one, technically, but I am not a psychologist. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind because your experiences are your experiences, and they may be nicely different. And serious burnout and serious mental illness is a serious thing. And if you have any issues with that, I'm not going to help you because you might need actual help. And so I don't want to give you any false pretenses that I know all about this topic. But we are going to have a little bit of fun talking about it, but it is serious. So if you do struggle with depression or full-out burnout, which we'll talk a little bit about, then that's probably a time where you need to at least look into getting some help of some kind, whether professional or just someone to talk to. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as we have a little bit of fun. So burnout. Why should you care about burnout? Well, let's start with what it causes. If you have a burned out worker or if you are burned out, you're going to see a loss in productivity. You're going to see your or your employer's health start to suffer. You're going to have issues keeping your job or keeping your employees if they're burning out. General happiness. It's kind of nice to work in a place where there's a certain level of happiness in the workplace. And managers, it's not just coders, managers, pretty much every area of work, anyone working in anything from bussing tables to programming to flying aircraft can easily get burned out. So this is not specifically to coders, but a lot of the stuff we'll talk about is a bit more specific to coders. So let's travel back in time to 1981. Yes, it's the year this came out. It's amazing. It's been that long ago. Burnout had gotten a little bit of academic look in the 70s, but not much. And then finally, Christina Maslach, I'm slaughtering her name, and Susan Jackson came up with pretty much the paper on official psychological burnout and created the Maslach burnout inventory, which is kind of the standard of what is burnout and how do we measure someone's level of burnout. And so we're going to go through the 3 different parts of that real quick because it's a great overview, and we'll see what each one is about. So starting off with emotional exhaustion. So that's when you really have a hard time just getting yourself to do things, and especially when you think about work. If you're thinking about work after work, thinking about relationships at work, do you have kind of just a ugh about it? Is that, and there's the actual inventory has specific measures, most of which don't make as much sense in a programming tech startup environment. Because the inventory was created for pretty much any profession. But do you feel kind of emotionally exhausted from work? Secondly, we got depersonalization. Are you having trouble dealing with people as people? Do you feel like you've kind of run out of care? I can't care about the people at work anymore. Are you turning them into nothing more than Soylent? Are you working with people, which this really doesn't work. In the inventory it says something akin to, are you dealing with people more like objects? Well, of course people are objects. I do object-oriented programming. What are you talking about? But are the people around you, are you working with them more in a level of, input, output, give me what I want, go away, get out of the way, and just do your thing, I'll do mine. And it can lead to kind of a bit of anger about people. If you feel very angry all the time about just the relationships at work. And so that kind of depersonalizes the interactions and is a good sign and good measure of some burnout. And finally, personal accomplishment. I think this is especially true for programmers. You want to be able to finish something. A program, you want to be able to finish goals. And I think one of the biggest causes of burnout in the tech community is not being able to finish and not being able to reach your goals. You just kind of keep going on and on and on, and the castle never comes. It never comes. How many people have felt like that on a project before? Oh, yeah. So meeting goals is critical for staying out of burnout, but not being able to meet goals is critical measure of burnout and something that is likely to cause burnout. For programmers, I know my used code is happy code. I hate writing code that never gets used, and I don't know anyone who really likes to write code like that, except maybe one PhD in computer science. So that's kind of the academic look at it, but let's make a distinction here. Burnout versus depression. What's the quick, easy way to know if you're depressed or if you're just burned out? And that is, it's about work. If you're feeling like at work, I'm feeling depressed at work, or all the feelings that you're getting are related to work, and outside of work you're feeling okay, then it's more likely burnout. Burnout can lead to depression, but that's kind of the main difference. And there's been a lot of research papers written about, and journal articles of, the burnout doesn't exist, it's just depression. But for our cases, the difference is it related to work? Are you just working all the time? So there can also be, now we move out of the more academic burnout, and this is my term, I don't think anyone else uses this, low level of burnout. You don't necessarily feel like you're in the middle of fireworks. Thank you, Colin Furs, for showing us what that looks like. And so general low-level burnout can mean, you just aren't having any fun doing your work. You have lower productivity. You may be finding yourself doing an unneeded job change. Unneeded, maybe. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Just a general dissatisfaction and feeling overwhelmed at work. Again, all related to work. But, if you just had a proper cup of tea, it might restore some normalities. So we're going to work now on, one other switch over. Is it burnout or is it boredom? So a lot of people can get bored at work without necessarily being burned out. And so I like this question. Do you like work when you're actually working? When you're actually doing your job, do you enjoy it? Then you're probably getting bored. You're not having burnout, but too much boredom can indeed lead to burnout. And I find that there's a lot of talk online of, if someone says you're burned out, you just need a new challenge. That's not necessarily true, but it can, new challenges can help prevent boredom into burnout. So, avoiding it. You're going to go to the doctor now, my favorite. You want to keep tabs on your physical and emotional health. That's just generally true, of course. But if you find yourself having more difficulty with eating, with the foods you're eating and stuff, that can be a sign that you're getting towards burnout. So just keeping good tabs on your health. Finishing goals. You don't want your projects to just start falling and crashing in the middle of everything. That's quite depressing right there. That's past burnout. So you want to make sure to finish those goals. Taking vacations. There you go. A talk that tells you to go out and take a vacation. What more could you want? So you can go back and tell your boss, I was told at dev lunch today I had to take a vacation in order to keep my productivity high.
Hey, we're trying to get more funding, not less.
But sometimes it's not just don't work, but you do different work. So finding something else at your job that you can do, something else that you can code. Maybe it's something not even related to programming. If you're a programmer, if you're more an IT guy, maybe it's actually doing some programming and finding some way to work something different. Preferably, again, things that you can finish and have that nice, hey, look, I met this goal that I was trying to get at. And then finally, there's balance. A work-life balance is critical to staying out of burnout. You cannot just work all the time and have no relationships outside of work and expect that to not lead to burnout. The keeping up relationships, hobbies, any kind of community involvement, something that gives you goals and senses of purpose outside of work is a critical step to making sure that you prevent getting into burnout. And then this guy, how many people have seen Wreck-It Ralph at some point? It's got a lot of nice geek jokes in it. But it's the tale of this guy, Ralph, and he actually has lots of problems. But one of his problems is that he's pretty burned out at his job. His job is every day to get up and smash an apartment building and then get defeated by the hero of the video game that he's a part of. And he goes out and he does just that. He goes out, he changes jobs, he goes and he tries playing a Halo ripoff. He tries playing in some other games. He ends up making friends outside of work. He also has a lot of social exclusion problems. But those are things that actually in the real life, if you're experiencing burnout, can lead to things such as you can find yourself withdrawing some from your own friends and from your work friends as you end up just getting effectively more and more tired and have less emotional wealth to share, then you can find yourself needing to protect yourself withdrawing, but that in and of itself is a self-defeating cycle of burnout. And having some level of control is the final, my final step. There's tons out there. So my final one is having some level of control about setting your own goals. If you have some level of control about if you can set your goals, then you're more likely to be able to meet them. Unless you're a perfectionist, that's a different problem. We'll leave that for somebody else to give a talk on. Perfectionist code. There you go. Somebody can give a talk on that. Yeah, there you go. Having a level of control, maybe how much you work, where you work from. I know I have a lot of fun being able to occasionally go and just work out of a coffee shop or work at the park. That kind of just change of scenery can definitely be helpful in preventing burnout. So hey, guess what? You found yourself in burnout. You avoided all the best tips, and you're now you're out of care. So what am I going to tell you to do? I'm going to tell you to care less. To actually care less about work. So generally, you're going to get burned out about things you care about. And I know, especially for programmers and a lot of people who are creating things, whether it be servers or designs or programs, that's kind of a piece of you. And you care a lot about the fact that you wrote that code, you think it's good, or at least you hope it is, and hopefully it's tested, so you kind of know it's good. And you want that code to be doing something, but at some level you just have to not care about it. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's an easy thing to say, but it's not an easy thing to do. But it's very difficult to, when you care about something a lot, when you go home, to stop caring about it. But that is one step towards getting out of burnout, I think, is to not care as much about the fact that your code that you just wrote and you spent 2 weeks writing this beautiful piece of code, and then the project got changed or scrapped, and now that code's never going to get anywhere. It can't even get to GitHub because of your work's open source policy. Rats! The world is not going to see how awesome I am. So another thing is just to change it up. You know, if you're being excellent to each other, try partying on for a change to the great philosophers of Bill and Ted. So have a different focus. That may or may not be possible at your work, but try switching from, you know, slogging away on that user module to switching over to the new module about widgets. Enthusiasm, it's catching. So one way to get out of burnout, or to help you get out of burnout, especially low-level burnout, is to have some friends, have some tech friends, get on ChaDev, and don't necessarily talk about your employer, but tell terrible stories that we can all laugh together at, maybe. And find some ways to get excited together, or find someone who is excited about something and have them teach you about it so that you can be excited about it with them. Because enthusiasm is catching, and you can also create a bit of enthusiasm by you know, email and say, hey, I'll give a talk on this topic because I want to get excited about it. And that way you're kind of forced to get yourself excited about it, because now you've told someone that in, you know, 3 days you'll give a talk about it. So excitement is something that can kind of get you out of it. And then this is one of my personal favorites. Set a timeline. You can go through hell and back if you know that in 4 months hell is going to freeze over and you got your parka on. So if you're in a bad spot, pull out your calendar app, stick it in there a couple months or a year or whatever it needs to be, and say, on this day, if these things haven't changed, I'm going to get out. I'm going to find something different. Something's going to change on this date if it doesn't change before then. And so if you have that date that you can kind of, I can make it till then. I can make it till then. It really helps to ease the symptoms of burnout and helps you to care less, that first one. Because if you know you're going to leave all that code behind in a couple months, or at least you have that date where you're going to make that decision, then you have some way to say, it doesn't really matter as much. Having some friends to help you get through it, to just sit down and slog through it. My daughter's 6, so I'm officially a brony because she's 6 and she loves My Little Pony, and that's pretty much all that plays in our house right now. But this guy, he's a workhorse. He will sit there, he doesn't say much, but he'll sit there and just slog through as much work as need be. And so I suggest slogging through with help, but there is a level at which you have to just say, I got to make money, I got to pay bills, and I'm going to go do it and try to keep going. And finally, you can quit, give up. And I am all for that, actually. So there you go. You can go back and say, the guy at Dev Lunch told me to take a vacation and to quit. But at some level, there's a level of burnout at which it starts affecting not just you, but it's affecting maybe your family or your personal relationships, your time out of work, and there's a level at which a change just needs to happen. And sometimes the easiest way to do that is to go in and say, hey, I'm leaving. And I suggest you kind of, set that date first. That way you can also say, on this date, I will start looking for a job 1 hour a night. And that way you can have a job before you say quit. That's generally a good thing for paying bills. But that's a way out of burnout. And that's actually probably the most common way out of burnout, unfortunately, is that people will get burned out. This is especially true, I think, in Silicon Valley and places where there's an amazing number of jobs. If you're getting, recruiters coming and knocking on your door every day out there, and even around here, you might have recruiters email you, a couple times a year. That can kind of feel like an easy way out. And a lot of people will do that when they don't really have to and don't really want to. I think that's important. You've worked hard at your job, you've contributed to that company, and you kind of want, at some level, to stick with it. But that's not always possible. And so that's why it's the last one on here of how to get out of it. But I think it's definitely, don't discount that as an option. Getting out is sometimes the best thing you can do. And a quick note, a lot of us are in startups. You see this one word that gets repeated more. Startups also tend to have more burnout just because of higher stress levels often. And so if you're in a startup, you need to be extra careful. And if you're working in a startup, I think you can also create a community and a culture around that startup that really limits burnout as much as possible. But startups do tend to easily help you burn out just because they have more stress, they have more time that they require generally. They do have more variety. That's one of the great things about startups. If you're in one, you can have more stress, but you can also be like, oh, well, nobody's doing that job over there, even though it has nothing to do with what I do. I'll give that a shot, a little bit, and I can help out there and get some variety. Startups can tend to be closer-knit groups, which can be both good and bad. Just greater chances of everything. And so it's a place to be a bit more careful. And there's a ton of other ideas out there about burnout. Marissa Mayer at Yahoo now recently gave a talk that she thinks resentment is a big factor in burnout. The fact that you're working instead of being with your family, that you're working instead of doing something you'd rather do at a certain level. And so she thinks that buildup of resentment against work is a big factor in burnout. Team issues, just life. There's a lot of ups and downs in life, and it can, even though burnout is officially things that happen in work that matter to create burnout, external factors can come in and just make it more difficult. A level of stress that was acceptable at work combined with new stresses from outside may find that the new stress level in total, even though it's the one at work that was okay earlier, that now that's unacceptable and it needs to change. Lack of challenges is a big one. Skill mismatch. Either way, that you landed in a job that you are way overqualified for or way underqualified for. Both have been attributed a lot to mismatch, to burnout, and there's hundreds more. You can search on Quora. It wasn't that helpful, but search the internet. Stack Overflow has a decent amount of talk about it. Because it's an important issue that's definitely growing. This will be posted later, but there are some references here. Good luck finding the journal articles online, unless you go to UTC. But there's a few websites as well. Special thank you to Google Image Search for most of the GIFs and whoever did them. So there we go. Woo! Step back a second. All that. Any questions that I won't be able to answer? Preferably ones I will, but I like both kinds.
In your research for preparing for this talk, did you see anything in regards to like a 4-day work week or something like that, like reduced hours, increased intensity?
It was more talk about staying within the 40-hour a work week as opposed to cutting it shift back to the 4-day a week. There was definitely more talk about, especially in the research that's been done, when you ask people to work consistently, 10-hour days, 7 days a week, guess what? They're going to get burned out. That's just the way it goes. I didn't find any talk specifically about 4-day work weeks, but that would definitely help, assuming, again, you're using that extra time in other ways that help prevent it instead of just, still sitting at home and worrying about work.
I think one thing that you kind of left out, or might also contribute to that, I think especially for programmers, is that a lot of times when programmers go home, we program. We have projects that we like to do, or we want to stay relevant on new technology, and so I think that kind of leads to it as well. I know that I find that I have to say, I don't want to look at that because I know I got to get up to work tomorrow, and I got to take a break from this. And I think that programmers tend to do that a lot.
Yeah,
I think that probably leads to that as well.
I definitely agree. That's where things like hobbies outside of computers can help. There are a lot of other meetups in town that are not programming related, although I think the vast majority of meetups in Chattanooga are programming related. But there are other ones. There's a lot of board gaming going on, even just computer or video gaming. I know a lot of people enjoy going to the library and getting out a book is always a good choice, or requesting some programming book that the library doesn't have.
Thanks, Will. So, kind of going along with this question, would you say that, at least in your experience, maybe people you talk to, it helps? I know programmers and people that are involved in technology tend to, it's a lifestyle. We're involved with it outside work, we're involved with it in work. And I see sometimes a little bit of a shift there where some people, they're involved with it at work and then they just refuse to do anything with it at home, or they're involved with it all the time, but what I see is maybe they're involved with different, whatever they're doing at work, maybe if they're a Python person at work, they're doing something vastly different like a closure or something at home, or if they're, PHP in one spot, they're Ruby somewhere else. Have you seen that maybe that helps a little bit more versus I'm just not going to do anything with technology when I walk out the doors of work?
I think so. It's important. I think the important thing there is to find something that you're excited about. If you're enjoying it, then that's going to be a release from any of the stresses at work. Whether that be programming, even if it's in the same language or something, but programming something you're excited about, as opposed to, another login script that your boss wants. And that's where I think that's where most people say the flip over is finding something that you're excited about. So it's your internal motivation pushing you along, as opposed to an external motivation at work. All righty. I will post the slides up and pass it back to you.